Hey, we had a problem with the stove and I ended up fixing it by just replacing one part. This is a pretty standard process I at least try with different equipment around the house. Let me tell you about the issue. The warming zone, which is like a burner that doesn't get real hot but kind of gets warm, had a problem. But the problem wasn't that it wouldn't turn on, the problem was that it wouldn't turn off. And so this little light would come on and stay on, and then I went to turn it off and it didn't go off, and it kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter, and that's a problem. But it was pretty easy to take care of. First I went and turned the power off at the breaker. That allowed me to check and see if it would just reset if I turned it off and back on. Left it off for a little bit, turned it back on. Didn't solve the problem, unfortunately. So I turned it off. I was able to pull the oven and stove away from the wall. I used a piece of cardboard to help it slide a little bit easier. Opened up the back with just the screws that were visible there, popped it open, and looked at the wiring for the warming zone controls. Bunch of wires going to it. I took all the wires off and labeled them so it'd be easier to figure out where they went when I had to put them back. Then I looked at the part and tried to find a model number. Went over to Google, typed that model number in, clicked on the first result, and it was a place selling them for just about 10 bucks. So that is a lot cheaper than a new stove. So I decided, let's do that. So purchased, and then we waited. Once the part arrived, I basically undid the whole process that I had been doing, putting everything back together, putting all the wires back on, screwing it back together, and then turning the breaker on and testing it to make sure that it worked. So I put it all back together, at least enough where it seemed kind of safe so that I could turn the breaker on and see if it worked. And lo and behold, it did! Success! Then I just put everything back together nice and tight the way it had been and slid the stove back into position. And then you're basically done. Here it is, it all works, turns on, turns off. Good enough for me. For $10 plus $5 shipping, seems like a really good way to fix something instead of replacing the whole unit. There you go. Did I miss anything? Did you see me undo something that I forgot to put back? That could definitely be a problem, but I fixed a few things like this, kind of Googling, trying to figure out what I should replace. One of the most interesting ones was a TiVo that I fixed. It still works. Fixed it a while back, and it only cost a few dollars in capacitors to replace. So check out that video here. Have you fixed a stove? Are you looking to replace a stove or want to fix it just to get it by? You know, maybe it's something as simple as a $10 part. You never know. Have a good one.